Small timeline about Russian Revolution. Before 1917 there was Revolution of 1905, which happens because of conditions that people were living in, and mostly educated people was simply against such state of things. They rebel against it and make a first revolution that called Revolution of 1905, and the people who commit this revolution was called Decembrists. Even before this revolution, conditions of living of, I don't know, some 90% of population of Russian Empire was pretty much like slaves. They wasn't slaves anymore, but some of them was. But they live in slave-like conditions. It means they had no home, they had no salary, hardly keep up, their food was simply junk, etc., etc. This made, and of course, don't forget that Tsar and his nobility didn't do anything to fix that situation. All they do is just make some stupid laws that make conditions for living for the majority of population, for like 90% of population, is just like shit, total shit. In 1914, Russian Empire was involved and pretty much started the First World War because of the goals that nobility wanted. In such conditions, things get even worse for the working people, for the majority of population, for the army. Even in army there was constant rebellions inside the army because people simply could not understand what they are fighting for. In reality, they were fighting for ability of some rich people to exploit 95% of population. So in these conditions, Revolution of 1917 happened. But it was the February Revolution of 1970, where most of Bolsheviks was aboard, including Lenin, including Stalin, as far as I remember. No Stalin nor Lenin was presented in Russia during the Revolution of 1905, when Tsar was replaced from the throne, was forced to step off the throne and leave the country for the normal government that took over. Until the October of 1917, of course, Bolsheviks get back into country because there was no more prosecuted party. Bolsheviks was presented by few dozens of the people. I don't know exactly how much Bolsheviks was there, but it was below the 100 altogether. Senate until the October Revolution was represented by any kind of political parties, left, right, monarchists, royalists, let's say, Democrats, Social Democrats, Constitutional Democrats, etc., etc. There was many parties presented in Senate until 1917. But this government simply can't handle the situation because they did pretty much the same as the Tsar did. They simply didn't know other way, and there was no other way except for the communist way. And only party that represents such way was represented by only few people, really few. Senate consists maybe 10 of Bolshevik party representatives was represented in Senate. So maybe, I don't know, I don't remember exactly, but something about 200 or 300 people altogether was represented in Senate, and yet none of them provided the solution for the problems that Russian Empire had. Yes, Bolsheviks was the driving force behind the second revolution, yet, again, they wasn't majority of the Senate. And they did not, there was simply no point in destroying it was no point in destroying the Russian Empire from the inside. So if you ignore all the facts that mass starvations, slave-like living conditions for 90 or 95% of population, lousy salaries, people simply die because they work 11, 14 hours a day, children work, women work, doesn't matter. The people in charge was even not interested in who is working. They was interested in many hours of work and pay as less as they possibly can. If you don't consider this and simply blame the Jews that they took over, then there is simple understanding that there was no such propaganda like we have right now in 20th or 21st century. And simply convince majority of uneducated people who can't read, who don't watch TV, don't listen radio, simply convince people that we Bolsheviks came to took over this country and destroy the Russian Empire in order to give up it to German army or something along those lines. It's simply plain stupid. In such conditions, in this time, at the same time, at the territory of Soviet Republic, there was presented like I don't know, maybe 10 different military groups, it was military of foreign countries. If Bolsheviks did everything wrong and used only repressions, those military groups could support White Army. White is the rebellion army. The White Army, the White Armies was fully supplied by French, English, Japan, American, and some other. I have forgotten which other force was supply White Armies with ammunition, guns, etc. With help of those armies, people could simply rebel and took over, but Red Army was always represented with majority of the people. And the majority of the people saw what changes country gets through. Majority of the people during 1922 saw what was going on in country, what changes were made, and where country is heading. And even if we consider that, okay, there was big propaganda, they make everybody believe, and then they simply betray everyone and start to use repressions. Don't forget that during that until the 1941, many armies was trained and prepared on the borders and inside the country. Pre-1941, when the war starts, those people was fully armed. Those people was trained as armies, etc., etc., etc. It means that you simply cannot prevent those people if they wish to rebel against the government in Moscow, because many people was based in Moscow. Those people simply will give up the country to foreign invaders just to get rid of the Bolsheviks, and they didn't do it. Even vice versa. The main slogan was for the homeland, for the Stalin, because they saw what changes country went through since 1917 and until 1941. There were situations, many different situations, like Leningrad blockade, like fight under Stalingrad, fight under the Moscow, over the Moscow. In all those situations, people could simply give up the major points and give up the country, and they did not, because they saw what changes was made again until that day. In 20 years, country changed drastically in favor of the majority of population, of 19 up to 95% of population. And even those provided equal opportunity to everyone. Everyone include even the oppressors, those kulaks who you always hear about, also had equal opportunities to get educated and do the jobs. Previous nobility, tsarists, people who work for Tsar, people who served Tsar, they was provided with major posts in Red Army, generals, colonels, etc., etc. They was represented in Red Army. It means that they, if they wish, if they saw that country get worse, if there is repressions, oppression, and fear mongering, and like all total fear, those people was fully armed, having full armies, and they can simply rebel against this power, at least during the World War II. Give up some positions, give up some cities, major cities, important cities. And they didn't. They fought until the Berlin. Because they saw what country become. And even after the war, nothing changed. Even with Stalin's death, for majority of population, nothing changed. Equal opportunities, equal access to everything for everyone. Even during the, how to say it, I don't know in English this word, but even during the 60s, when the country turned into capitalistic rails and economies transferred, the Communist Party monopolized the full power and become really dictatorship in the country. 1970s was the most successful years in Russian Empire history, in Russian history, let's say that. You can't say that just Russian history, because there also every republic prospered. All countries that was involved in how to say it, Warsaw Bloc also prospered. Warsaw Pact. It wasn't just all that Russia is prospered and everybody else is just simply playing dumb and laying in ruins. No. Universities, higher standards of living, good healthcare, good, not the best. Best in the world education, best in the world, how to say it, housing problem solving, because, you know, just 20 years before the 70s, just 25 years before this 1970, the whole country was in ruins, literally in ruins. Many things changed during this short 25-year period, and people saw that, and running around with these foolish ideas that Jews somehow rule all of that repressions was in place in country, that millions of people just died because who knows why, that Germans bought off the Bolsheviks. All those conspiracy theories have no relation to reality whatsoever, to reality of what's happening in Soviet Union. All of these represent and have good, well documented, represented by documents and very well documented. All those changes and simple logic will tell you basic logic will tell you that if something happened like this, therefore that is. There is no Jew conspiracy, German conspiracy, Japan conspiracy, British conspiracy, I don't know, any kind of conspiracy. There is no communists come just only to monopolize the power and took over and oppress people and kill people and starve them to death. It is bullshit. It is literal bullshit. There was no period in Russian Empire history before 1917. It was the Russian Empire. Before the Bolsheviks took over in 1917, well, not in 1917 altogether, but let's say before the revolution, there was no such period of such economical growth, of such growth of science, education, healthcare, access to standard of living, access to food, etc., etc. There was no such period in history of Russian Empire prior to communist period. That's all. That simple math, the simple basic logic that must tell you that all you know in over there in Western world is pretty much propaganda. Propaganda against communism, against a better living for the majority of population instead of just 1% of population. Yes, there was made mistakes, and that is why USSR collapsed eventually. That is why I am constant critic of communism, that I think they did not count many questions that should be counted, that should be asked in order to fix the problems that was made by USSR. But simply running around with these conspiracy theories and make people believe that that happened because I believe so, that simply is basic idiotism. You must respect yourself. You must think logically. You must have access to documents and to people who really lived here. How many defectors there was? Tens? Hundreds? At the same time, 270 million of Soviet people is prospered. In the same period, 100 people live bad? Well, what can I say? There was criminals in USSR who live bad, who have to spend their time in jails. Let's listen to them, prefer them to 280 million of population of USSR. Look at the Warsaw Pact countries who mostly become shitholes. Think, use your brain, use the logic.